9th of June 1943, Papua New Guinea. Over the steaming jungle, a P-39 from the 80th Fighter Squadron twists through a dogfight with 3 Japanese planes. He nails the first in a climbing burst, rolls, and slices the second apart with 50 seconds. As he pulls into position for the third, his voice cracks over the radio, "Engine died!" And then nothing but static. The Airacobra tumbles out of the sky. In New Guinea, the deadliest enemy wasn't the Japanese in the air. It was local coral dust that killed dozens planes. Corporal Nora Ellison, 23 years old, woman, motor pool kid from Washington State. She came to the 13th Air Force as a wrench in a service squadron that sleeps in tents and lives in the roar of test runs. She has spent the last month torquing cylinder hold-downs and swapping plugs, while pilots of the 44th Bomb Squadron fly anti-shipping strikes into the slot and come home with holes in their wings and grit in their guts. A lot of don't come home at all. The day before, Captain Red Mateo brought his Mitchell in hot with oil pressure falling through the floor. Post-flight tear-down found powder everywhere, sand in the carb throat, white dust past the screen, grit in the scavenge pump. The official fix from Townsville is clean more, change more, pray more. It hasn't worked. The coral comes anyway, through any gap, around any baffling. Nora grew up breathing dust. Her father ran combines on the Palouse. She knows what chaff does to engines, and what a simple stocking can catch before it gets to a carb. She tries the chain, proper channels. The engineering officer shrugs, says Air Corps specs don't authorize non-standard intake media. Says anything in the intake stream risks fire or FOD. Says if she wants a filter, wait for Brisbane to ship a crate of Curtis oil bath units that will never arrive. Nora nods, says yes sir, then walks to the nurse's tent with a sack of tinned peaches from the mess. An hour later, she's back on the crate with 4 pairs of nylons in her pocket, a length of safety wire between her teeth, and a plan that would get her run out of the service if anyone with brass actually watched engines die the way mechanics do up close, with tools in their hands and names in their heads. She stretches a single layer of stockings sheer over the mouth of the intake plenum, then a second at 90 degrees cross-hatched. She cinches it behind the lip with wire, lays a third layer over the snorkel, and a fourth over the carb air door. No folds, no loose tails, tight enough to sing when she plucks it. She pops the cowl, seals bypass leaks with canvas tape, and drops the cowl back on. It takes 6 minutes per engine. She marks a chalk X on the cowling, where only crew chiefs will see. "Ellison," Sergeant Fink hollers over the prop wash. "What in God's name is that?" "Pre-filter," she shouts back. "Borrowed from civilization. Command'll roast you. Let them. If it doesn't work, I'll cut it off before inspection." At 1,500, Red Mateo taxis out again, loaded to the gills with 500-pounders for Vila. Nora watches dust climb into a white wall behind the Mitchell as it heads for the threshold. She doesn't watch the takeoff. She watches the intake lip through binoculars when he returns, streaked gray, where coral has tried to get in and didn't. When they pull the cowls after shutdown, the carb throats are clean for the first time in weeks. The stockings are chalk white and packed like a flour sack. That night, a pilot from the 67th Fighter Squadron P-39 Airacobras, chewing coral every dawn, hears about the trick. "You putting ladies' hosiery on my Allison?" he jokes. "If it keeps me from dead sticking into the jungle," Nora says, "I'll put a wedding veil on it." The joke gets a laugh, but the stakes are simple math. Coral dust versus engines. Doctrine versus physics. And a mechanic who knows what a cheap piece of nylon can stop when men with manuals say nothing can. Nora didn't sell the idea with memorandums. She sold it with engines that didn't quit. Within 48 hours, the stockings weren't just on Red Mateo's Mitchell, they were on 3 more B-25 seconds, 2 P-39 seconds, and a pair of C-47 seconds, hauling parts between Munda and Rendova. Rumor spread by the fastest route in a combat zone, pilots talking to pilots, crew chiefs swapping tricks over coffee, a sergeant shouting across a hot ramp. The first skeptics were the real enemy corrosion, grit, and Air Corps doctrine. But the second skeptics were human. Officers who read specifications the way priests read scripture. The specification said no foreign fabric in the intake. The manual said oil bath screens only, factory-approved devices. NARA shrugged and started collecting proof. She rigged a simple bench test under a failing Mitchell engine, aft of the revetment. A lamp for a tachometer, a second-hand vacuum gauge, a length of canvas ducting to simulate prop wash, and, most importantly, a handful of pulverized reef she'd scraped from the runway. She ran the engine at idle, then at full power with the naked factory screen and measured vacuum, temperature, and crud through the carb. Then she fitted a double-layer nylon pre-filter and ran the test again. The change was obvious. The gauge showed steadier suction, spark plugs stayed cleaner, blow-by dropped, and when she split the bowl afterward, the coral that had coated the throat with the naked screen was now caught on the stocking's outer face. Not rocket science, NARA told the mess later. It's just a sponge in the wrong place. But the mechanics heard it differently. It was a fix they could make in 6 minutes with wire and an old hose clamp. The pilots heard it differently. Less engine roughness meant fewer emergency returns and fewer forced landings in the palms. The first public conversion came when Lieutenant Tony Hawk Marquez of the 67th Fighter Squadron limped back from a dawn sweep. His Airacobra had gone up heavy with coral in the supercharger past the mesh. Post-flight, his crew chief found the stocking caked like a flour sack and the compressor face almost clean. Marquez walked to NARA's crate and slapped his palm against her shoulder. "Boy," he said, "that stocking just bought me my next mission." Not everyone welcomed the stocking. An engineering officer, Captain Aldridge, saw the chalk X and saw red. "You'll cause a fire," he told NARA the morning after Mateo's clean carb. "Nylon in an intake? Flammable. Not authorized. You'll be court-martialed for jury-rigging flight controls." NARA listened, then asked for a watch and the engine log. She ran a controlled sequence of taxi, idle, high-power runs, monitoring hotspots, oil temps, and oil pressure. She documented nothing overheated. No flame roots appeared in the intake stream. The stocking remained cool beneath the full blast of the prop wash. She learned a maintenance trick pilots had forgotten. Keep the pre-filter external, protect the carb throat with a factory mesh inside, and make the nylon a sacrificial, easily inspectable barrier you can shake out between sorties. Evidence beat doctrine. Over the next week, the pattern repeated at Munda. Mitchells with nylons had fewer carb fouling incidents. P-39 seconds returned from strafes with unchanged oil pressure. C-47 seconds used the trick on dusty forward strips and had fewer engine replacement cycles. A small spreadsheet of sorts scrawled on a sheet of C-ration cardboard, later typed by a bored clerk, showed a drop in unscheduled engine teardowns from 3 per squadron per week to about 1. That was field math easy to understand. More aircraft availability, more sorties, more fire on target. Word-hopped islands. Mechanics from Rendezvous paddled ash across a coral channel to see NARA's setup. They copied the crosshatch method. She used 2 layers at right angles to catch more particulate, cinched tight with spring wire so the stocking didn't flutter loose at full throttle. They learned to backwash the stocking, tap it between gloved hands on the evening revetment, then soak briefly in kerosene to dissolve oily grit, wring, and let it dry on the cowl before the next sunrise. The stockings were cheap and reusable. A pair of spare nylons cost 3 days' worth of cocoa in the PX and were easier to mend than an intake screen. Pilots began to notice other changes too. Engines that used to spit and cough on climb now took power linearly. Takeoff rolls shortened because throttle advances produced immediate response without being blunted by choking grit. A P-39 pilot who'd been forced into 3 emergency landings in 2 weeks, each time with bent valves and hold-down studs scraped, told his CO he wouldn't fly without the pre-filter. Commanders, when they saw the sortie logs and the faces of men who had quit fretting about an engine failing on final, started softening. "We'll evaluate," said one at first. The word evaluate in a theater context usually meant bureaucratic dithering. But the evaluation that followed involved more than forms. It involved getting an A-20 back from a ditch because the pilot didn't have to feather the engine, getting a B-25 off the ground with full bomb and fuel load, and seeing a scheduled replacement engine reallocated to another squadron. There were failures. In one case, a rigged stocking had been tucked too deep, under a cowl lip where oil could pool. A mechanic forgot to drain a sump, and oil soaked the fabric. A small fire started in that instance during a ground run. The crew chief's quick thinking and a fire extinguisher snuffed it before it spread. NARA used that lesson as a rule. Keep the stocking external, inspect between runs, and never substitute a frayed wash for a freshly mended layer. She taught crews how to stitch a drawstring channel so the stocking would sit perfect around the intake bead and never be sucked inward under full throttle. Within a month, the trick spread across New Georgia and into Treasury and Bougainville. Pilots who returned to Australia for rest and reconditioning told engineers in Townsville and Brisbane about the nylon trick. A petty officer from an RAAF maintenance party carried a roll of stockings back to his base and taught his men. The idea leapt from island to island because it fit the operating reality. Engines would be eaten by coral unless someone caught it first. NARA's stockings did that cheaply, quickly, and without waiting for a crate from the factory. The only approvals came in the form of fewer engine failures on travelers' logs and the occasional folded thank you note tucked into her toolbox. The 10th of August 1943. Munda Airfield. By now, the stockings are everywhere tied, stretched, wired, and knotted across intakes like trophies of quiet rebellion. The revetments look like laundry lines. Pilots joke they're flying the world's fastest washing machines. But to mechanics, the laughter hides vindication. The nylon works, engines live longer, and the supply officer is out of hosiery. Nora Ellison's small victory has become a logistical problem. The Quartermaster's Depot on Guadalcanal reports an unexplained shortage of women's stockings in the South Pacific inventory, 200 pairs in 1 week, requisitioned for maintenance use. The paperwork makes it to Colonel Bradford, base commander at Munda, who storms into the maintenance yard, red-faced. Whose idea, he demands, was it to requisition lingerie under Army property forms? Nora doesn't hide. She steps forward, coveralls rolled to her knees, face streaked with grease. Mine, sir. Bradford stares. You think this is a joke? No, sir. But the coral dust is. It's killing every engine you send up. She hands him a spark plug. The electrode is polished metal, the porcelain spotless. That's from a B-25 with 40 hours. Should have been fouled to hell by now. That's what the stockings did. Bradford takes the plug, turns it in his fingers, and says nothing. Regulations are one thing, results are another. 3 days later, official channels catch up. A telegram from Townsville arrives. Field reports indicate significant reduction in engine wear at Munda Point. Request technical description of modification referred to as Ellison filter. For the first time, her name is on paper. But instead of praise, the message comes with an inspection order. Headquarters wants proof it's safe. They're sending Major Arthur C. Denham, an engineering officer who thinks field improvisation is sabotage. Denham arrives in pressed khakis and spotless boots that last 40 seconds on the coral. He meets Nora in the engine line. "You're the corporal behind this filter nonsense?" he asks. "Yes, sir." He looks at the nylon stretched across the B-25's intake and frowns. "You're choking airflow, not filtering it. You'll cause detonation, overheat the heads, maybe kill a crew. Where's your data?" Nora gestures toward a wooden crate stacked with notebooks, all handwritten runtimes, oil pressures, exhaust gas temps, manifold pressures. Denham flips through the pages, unimpressed. "Unofficial," he mutters. "No calibration, no instrumentation." "Sir," Nora says, "I don't need a lab to see fewer holes in pistons." Denham orders a test. He selects 2 engines, one with the nylon, one without. Mechanics run them at takeoff power for 10 minutes, side by side. The naked engine's filters glow white with coral dust by minute 3. At minute 6, its oil pressure drops, and the exhaust smokes gray rings going. At minute 10, denim waves the shutdown. The nylon-equipped engine runs clean, even, unbothered. The stockings, once tan, are chalk white and caked tight with grit. Denim runs a finger across them, then across his throat to wipe the powder away. "You're trapping everything," he says quietly, "including my pride." That night he writes a radio dispatch. "Recommend field trials continue. Material effective as temporary filter medium in coral environments. Approval pending." It's the closest thing to an apology she'll get. The next morning, she's up before sunrise, cutting stockings into squares with tin snips, and training the new kids' green mechanics off a fresh transport from Espiritu Santo. She shows them the trick of cross-laying the weave so the airflow balances across the cylinder bank, how to twist the safety wire tight but not sharp, how to check suction by the tone the nylon makes when tapped. She calls it listening to the engine breathe. And she isn't exaggerating. The coral is everywhere. You can taste it on your teeth when you talk. Every cloud kicked up by a taxiing plane is a lethal blizzard for compressors. Without filters, the squadron is burning through power plants faster than replacements can reach from the mainland. Even Japanese raids have slowed because the Americans' own dust is doing more damage than enemy fire. But not on NORA's line. The 42nd Bomb Group's aircraft availability is up 40%. Their flight hours between engine changes double. The pilots start calling her Angel of the Air Intakes. They leave her offering cigarettes, soap, a tiny silver bracelet engraved, "For breathing room." Denham's report circulates across the South Pacific Command. The term Ellison filter becomes shorthand in maintenance memos. In the Solomon Islands, on New Georgia, Bougainville, and Espiritu Santo, orders go out. Implement temporary nylon filter system until factory-approved replacements arrive. No replacements ever do. The Army keeps fighting with nylon stretched over intakes, the material supplied quietly by Red Cross shipments and nurses' donations. Japanese fighters still strafe the field, anti-aircraft guns still thunder. But the greater killer, the coral, has been beaten by an idea small enough to fit in a uniform pocket. At night, NORA writes in her notebook by lantern light. Engines still running. Fewer tears today. Stockings hold. She doesn't know that somewhere above, in the dark sky over Kolombangara, a bomber with one of her filters is bringing back 5 airmen who would otherwise have died gliding into the sea. The 28th of August, 1943. By now, Nora Ellison is a corporal in title only. She runs a section of mechanics from the 13th Service Squadron. Her Ellison filters have become standard across New Georgia, but the new base is worse than anything she's seen. After just 2 days, the B-25 seconds she maintains are fouling plugs again. Pilots report surging during climb, and black smoke on throttle advance signs of airflow restriction. The nylon filters are clogging too fast. For the first time since Munda, her trick is failing. She doesn't sleep that night. Instead, she sits under a poncho in the maintenance shack, staring at a stripped-down carburetor and listening to rain hammer the roof. Somewhere in the distance, another plane aborts takeoff, coughing on coral dust. She takes the used filters from a bucket beside her. Each one is a gray mat of sludge dust mixed with humidity into a sticky film that suffocates the nylon weave. Wiping them clean only spreads the grime deeper. What worked dry doesn't work wet. The problem is obvious. The coral dust has turned from powder to paste. A dry filter traps it. A wet one becomes glue. The Army's supply lines won't send her anything better, not in the middle of a campaign. There's no stockpile of paper filters or pre-cleaners. The manuals just say, "Avoid dusty conditions." She laughs bitterly. The South Pacific is nothing times, but times dusty conditions. At 0300, she finds her answer in a place no mechanic should ever look. the garbage pit. She's dumping oily rags when she spots a barrel of aviation oil filters, the old cartridge kind from generators. The material inside them isn't paper. It's treated mesh, oil-resistant, meant to hold shape under pressure. She tears one open and cuts the inner sleeve out. The texture feels familiar, almost like stocking nylon but coarser. She stretches it over her palm, dips it in a puddle, and watches the water bead off. "Hydrophobic," she mutters. "You'll breathe." By dawn, she's building prototypes, layering the coarse filter mesh under a single nylon wrap. The inner layer sheds water, the outer one traps dust. She calls it the double skin. When the first test run fires up, the engine runs clean for 10 minutes, then 20, without a cough. She pulls the cowl after 30. The nylon layer is gray, soaked with mud, but the mesh beneath it gleams metallic. She's just built the first two-stage tropical filter anyone in the South Pacific has ever seen. That day, a storm knocks out communications with Guadalcanal, and the strip becomes an island within an island. Flights can't leave until the rain stops. NARA uses the downtime like gold. She trains the entire maintenance section, 14 men, to build the double-skin filters. They use spare generator mesh, nylons donated by nurses, and wire from salvaged radio antennas. Each filter takes 12 minutes to assemble, 4 to install. By the third day, every aircraft on the line is fitted with her design. The next morning, the first mission to Rabaul launches from the sodden strip, 4B, 25 seconds, loaded with 500-pounders, escorted by P-38 seconds. NARA watches the takeoffs from the coral berm, rain still falling in sheets. The engines sound crisp, no coughing, no surging. It's the cleanest run she's heard in weeks. She crosses her arms and waits. 6 hours later, the formation returns. Every plane lands. No emergency calls, no feathered props. Every engine running smooth. One pilot, Major Glass, group commander, climbs out and pulls off his goggles. "What the hell did you do to my bombers?" he shouts. "They ran like brand new." "Washed their faces," NARA answers. The official report that week notes dramatic decrease in mechanical failures due to intake fouling. The rain continues for days, but the planes keep flying. Word reaches Guadalcanal, then Espiritu Santo, and soon the field manual for tropical maintenance adds a new line, under Time's air cleaner field adaptations. Asterisk, asterisk. Use fine nylon cloth, layered over coarse mesh where excessive coral dust and humidity are present. Referred to as Ellison Type B filter. Asterisk. The Navy notices next. At Segi Point, CB's modifying Corsair intakes copy her two-stage filter for marine aircraft flying close support. The Corsair's radial engines are even more vulnerable to grit, and the Ellison filter doubles their time between overhauls. Pilots start calling it the nylon veil. Mechanics joke that the war might be won by laundry. But not everyone's laughing. In September, fuel convoys are delayed by Japanese suitors still strafe the field. Anti-aircraft guns still thunder. But the greater killer, the coral, has been beaten by an idea small enough to fit in a uniform pocket. At night, NARA writes in her notebook by lantern light. Asterisk. Engine still running. Fewer tears today. Stockings hold. Asterisk. She doesn't know that somewhere above, in the dark sky over Columbangara, a bomber with one of her filters is bringing back 5 airmen who would otherwise have died gliding into the sea. The 12th of October, 1943. Guadalcanal. The war in the Solomons is shifting north, but the airfields behind the front are just as vital and just as filthy. Every day, hundreds of aircraft cycle through Munda, Bougainville, and Henderson Field for refueling and repair. The coral dust is now part of the landscape, baked into the metal and lungs of every man working the line. NARA Ellison arrives at Henderson with a crate of her silk and nylon filters and a notebook full of data. The order had come from the 13 Bomber Command, report to headquarters for technical evaluation of improvised air filtration devices. She knows what that means, another round of bureaucrats deciding whether to kill or copy her invention. But this time, she has results that no officer can argue with. The 42nd Bomb Group's engine failure rate dropped by 70%. Their B-25 seconds logged the highest flight readiness in the theater. Her filters have already reached Espiritu Santo and even the Navy at Segi Point. The war has moved faster than the paperwork. At the command tent, she meets Colonel Thomas Grady, Chief of Maintenance for the 13th Air Force. Grady's an old-school flyer from the pre-war Army Air Corps, skeptical of anything not printed in a technical manual. He listens to her report in silence, glancing at the grease-stained logbook she lays on his desk. "These results verified by an engineering officer?" he asks. "No, sir," Nora says. "Just verified by engines that still start." Grady frowns. "You understand the risk of introducing unapproved material into aircraft systems?" "I understand the risk of engines failing at takeoff," she replies. "That's killed more of our crews here than the Japanese." There's a long pause. Then Grady closes the notebook. "You've got 2 hours. Set up a demo." She finds a pair of old R-2600 engines in the maintenance yard, stripped from grounded B-25 seconds. One is bare, the other fitted with her silk and nylon mesh. She calls for a fuel truck, fills both tanks, and starts the engines side by side. As they roar to life, she opens 2 sandbags of coral dust and dumps them into the prop wash. The bare engine coughs first. Oil pressure starts to wobble, exhaust turning gray. After 5 minutes, the temperature needle climbs into the red. The filtered engine hums steady, exhaust clear, oil pressure stable. When the bare engine sputters to a stop, Nora cuts both throttles and removes the filters. Inside the unprotected carburetor, everything is white, a crust of coral dust coating the manifold and throttle plates. Inside the protected one, the air passages gleam clean. Grady runs his finger through the filter, shakes his head, and finally smiles. "You just embarrassed Wright Aeronautical," he says. "Congratulations." The next week, headquarters cables, Brisbane field adaptation proven effective. Recommend temporary adoption in theater. It's as close to official recognition as she'll get. But the war keeps moving, and Nora keeps following it. By November, she's flown to the Treasury Islands to train mechanics for the 70th Fighter Squadron P-38 Lightnings, now operating from newly built coral runways. The twin-engine fighters are faster, hungrier, and even more fragile when it comes to dust. The Allison V-1710 engines use tight clearances. 1 grain of coral in a supercharger can score the impeller and cost 1,000 horsepower. The squadron's line chief, Sergeant Joe Winkler, is skeptical. "Lady, I don't think stockings will save my lightnings," he says. Nora doesn't argue. She walks to a P-38, climbs the ladder, and pulls off one of the intake screens. The metal is white, rough as sandpaper. "You can polish that all day," she says, "or you can let this do the work." She hands him a piece of silk mesh. "You'll see." They test her filter on one engine. After a week of sorties, the difference is obvious. The unfiltered Allison needs new plugs. The filtered one doesn't even foul. Winkler starts cutting up old parachutes that night. Within 3 days, every P-38 on the field has the Ellison veil. Then, the unexpected happens. One morning, a Zero raid hits the strip. 4 bombs fall along the fighter line, scattering shrapnel and debris. 2 aircraft are destroyed. A third, with Nora's filter fitted, takes a direct blast of dust and fragments.